St. John is the largest city in New Brunswick and the second largest city in the maritime provinces. It is known as the Fundy City due to its location on the north shore of the Bay of Fundy at the mouth of the St. John River, as well as being the only city on the bay. In 1785, St. John became the first incorporated city in Canada. St. John had a population of 70,063 in 2011 over an area of 315.82 square kilometers. The St. John metropolitan area covers a land area of 3,362.95 square kilometers across the Caledonia Highlands, with a population of 127,761, second only to Moncton. History. Notable: First 1785. First quarantine station in North America, Partridge Island, established by the city's charter. In the early 19th century, it greeted sick and dying Irish emigrants arriving to the New World with inhospitable conditions. 1830. The first chartered bank in Canada, the Bank of New Brunswick. Canada's oldest publicly funded high school, St. John High School. 1838. First penny newspaper in the Empire, the tri-weekly St. John News, established by George E. Fennerty. 1842. Canada's first public museum, originally known as the Gesner Museum, named after its Nova Scotian founder Abraham Gesner, the inventor of kerosene. The museum is now known as the New Brunswick Museum. 1851. Marco Polo ship launched. 1854. The world's first automated steam foghorn was invented by Robert Fowles. 1870. Canada's first YWCA, established by Mrs. Agnes A. Blizzard in a house on Germain Street. 1870. First Knights of Pythias in British Empire. 1872. First monitor-top railroad cars in the world invented by James Ferguson. The original model is in the New Brunswick Museum in St. John. 1880. First clockwork time bomb developed in 1880. 1906. First public playground in Canada, which was started by Miss Mabel Peters. This playground is known as the Allison Ground Playground in Rockwood Court. On July 16, 2009, 103 years after its opening, Allison Ground Playground is the first playground that Mabel Peters encouraged, to be renamed in her honor as Mabel Peters Playground. 1907. First orchestra to accompany a silent moving picture on the North American continent was by Walter Golding in the Old Nickel Theatre, Maine. 1907. 1918. First Minister of Health of the British Empire, F. Roberts, MD. 1918. One of the first police unions in Canada, the St. John Police Protective Association, was formed in St. John. 1923. First Miss Canada, Mrs. Harold Drummy. Geography and climate. Physical geography. Situated in the south-central portion of the province, along the north shore of the Bay of Fundy at the mouth of the St. John River. The city is split by the south-flowing river, and the east side is bordered on the north by the Kennebeckasis River where it meets the St. John River. At Grand Bay, the harbor is home to a terminal for cruise ships as well as being a fairly busy home for various container ships. The St. John River itself flows into the Bay of Fundy through a narrow gorge several hundred feet wide at the center of the city. It contains a unique phenomenon called the reversing falls, where the diurnal tides of the bay reverse the water flow of the river for several kilometers. A series of underwater ledges at the narrowest point of this gorge also create a series of rapids. The topography surrounding St. John is hilly, a result of the influence of two coastal mountain ranges which run along the Bay of Fundy, the St. Croix Highlands and the Caledonia Highlands. The soil throughout the region is extremely rocky with frequent granite outcrops. The coastal plain hosts numerous freshwater lakes in the eastern, western and northern parts of the city. In St. John, the height difference from low to high tide is approximately 8 meters due to the funneling effect of the Bay of Fundy as it narrows. The reversing falls in St. John, actually an area of strong rapids, provides one example of the power of these tides. At every high tide, ocean water is pushed through a narrow gorge in the middle of the city and forces the St. John River to reverse its flow for several hours. Neighborhoods. St. John is a city of neighborhoods, with residents closely identifying with their particular area. South Central Peninsula, Uptown. The Central Peninsula on the east side of the harbor, and the area immediately opposite on the west side, hosts the site of the original city from the merger of Partown and Carlton. The western side of the Central Peninsula subsequently saw increased development and currently includes the Central Business District and the Trinity Royal Heritage District, which together are referred to as Uptown by residents throughout the city. The term Uptown comes from the time when the city was an active port city and people at the slips would go up the hill to the city. As well, most of this area in the Central Peninsula is situated on a hill. It is rarely called downtown. The south end of the Central Peninsula, south of Duke Street, is appropriately called the South End. North End. The area north of the Highway No. 1 from the South Central Peninsula is called the North End, both areas being predominantly urban, residential older housing which is undergoing gentrification. Much of the North End is made up of the former city of Portland and comprises another former working-class area which is slowly undergoing gentrification at the eastern end of Douglas Avenue, immediately north of Portland and upstream from the reversing falls is the former community of Indiantown. Vessels navigating the St. John River can only transit the reversing falls gorge at slack tide. Thus, Indiantown became a location during the 19th and 20th centuries where tugboats and paddle-wheelers could dock to wait. Being located at the beginning of the navigable part of the St. John River, Indiantown also became a major terminal for vessels departing to ply their trade upriver, further north of the central part of the city, and northeast of the North End and Portland. Along the southern bank of the Kennebecasis River is the area of Milledgeville, which is generally considered a neighborhood separate from the North End. The boundary of Milledgeville is typically thought to begin at the Y intersection of Somerset Street and Millage Avenue or right after Tartan Street. It is a middle to upper-class neighborhood. Located here is University of New Brunswick, as well as New Brunswick's largest healthcare center, the St. John Regional Hospital, and St. John's only completely French school and community center, Centre Scolaire Communautaire Samuel de Champlain. The eastern area of the North End plays host to the city's largest park, and one of Canada's largest urban parks. Rockwood Park encompasses 890 hectares of upland Acadian mixed forest, many hills and several caves, as well as several freshwater lakes. With an extensive trail network, a golf course, and the Cherry Brook Zoo. The park was designed by Calvert Vaux in the mid to late 19th century. Mount Pleasant borders the park, and is generally seen as distinct from the traditionally poorer North End, east side. To the east of the Courtney Bay, Fall Bay and south of New Brunswick Route 1 is the east side, where the city has experienced its greatest suburban sprawl in recent decades with commercial retail centers and residential subdivisions. There has been significant and consistent commercial and retail development in the Westmoreland Road, McAllister Drive, Consumers Drive, Majorsbrook Drive, Retail Drive corridor since the 1970s, including McAllister Place, the city's largest shopping mall, which opened in 1978, and with active year-to-year development since 1994. The city's current airport is located further east on the coastal plain among several lakes at the far eastern edge of the municipality. The malls were built by filling in Majorsbrook, making the area prone to flooding. West Side. The portion of the city west of the St. John River is collectively referred to as West Side, although West St. Johners typically divide this area into several neighborhoods. As mentioned previously, The Lower West Side is the former working-class neighborhood that was known as Carlton at the time of the city's formation in 1785. West and north of the Lower West Side is the former city of Lancaster, which was amalgamated into St. John in 1967. The dividing line is generally agreed upon to be Martello Tower and not Lancaster Avenue, with the streets east and south of Lancaster Avenue being considered to be the West Side, and the streets north and west of Lancaster Avenue having been renamed from Lancaster, NB, to St. John West, NB. The southern part of Lancaster abutting St. John Harbour and the Bay of Fundy is Bayshore and the location of Canadian Pacific Railway's Bayshore Yard. The north end of Lancaster, known as Fairville, is home to Moosehead Brewery and older neighbourhoods clustered along Manawaganish Road. North of Fairville are the communities of Milford and Randolph. Randolph, which is home to Dominion Park Beach, includes land on the city's largest island, and is joined by the canal bridge over Mosquito Cove on Greenhead Road. The area also contains the Irving Pulp and Paper Mill, a highly visible manufacturing plant that sits directly next to the Reversing Falls and is owned and operated by J.D. Irving, Limited. West of Lancaster, the city hosts its second largest park, and one of the largest coastal urban parks in the country. The Irving Nature Park, along Saints Rest Beach, sits on an extensive peninsula called Taylor's Island, extending into the western part of the harbour into the Bay of Fundy. The park is partially open to vehicles in summer and features ocean views and walking trails through mixed forests. Suburbs: St. John's suburbs, just on the edge of the city limit, are Rothesay, Quispamsis, and Grand Bay Westfield. Mainly residential, the suburbs have attracted many of St. John's residents leading to, until the last census of 2011, the city's population to shrink. Climate: the climate of St. John is humid continental. The Bay of Fundy never fully freezes, thus moderating the winter temperatures compared with inland locations. Even so, with the prevailing wind blowing from the west, the average January temperature is about -8.2 degrees Celsius. Summers are usually warm to hot, and daytime temperatures often exceed 25 degrees Celsius. The highest temperature recorded in a given year is usually 30 degrees Celsius or 31 degrees Celsius. The confluence of cold Bay of Fundy air and inland warmer temperatures often creates onshore winds that bring periods of fog and cooler temperatures. During the summer months, precipitation in St. John totals about 1,390 mm annually and is well distributed throughout the year, although the late autumn and early winter is typically the wettest time of year. Snowfalls can often be heavy, but rain is as common as snow in winter, and it is not unusual for the ground to be snow-free even in midwinter. Buildings and structures: Courtney Bay Smokestacks, Brunswick Square, 19-story office building with 511,032 square feet which was built in 1976. It is the largest office building in New Brunswick in terms of square footage and second in Atlantic Canada behind the Maritime Centre in Halifax. It is tied with Assumption Place in Moncton for the tallest in New Brunswick. Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception, City Hall, 15-story office building. Brunswick House, 14-story office building. Irving Building, 14-story office building. Harbourside Senior Citizens Housing Complex, 12-story apartment building. Harbour Building, 10-story office building. Mercantile Centre, 7-story office building. Chateau St. John Chapter 8-story hotel. City Market, Loyalist Man. National Historic Sites: there are 13 National Historic Sites of Canada in St. John. Demography. Population: the population of the city declined from the 1970s to the early 21st century, but this trend has now reversed itself and has shown its first increase in many years in the 2011 census. metropolitan area. In the year 2011, the population of the Greater St. John area was 127,761, of whom 49% were male and 51% female. Children under 5 accounted for approximately 21% of the population. People 65 and over accounted for 27% of the population. In the years between 1996 and 2005, the population of St. John declined 6.8%. When the census was taken in May 2006, the population of St. John was 69,684 compared with 68,103 in 2001. Ethnicity, religion and language. St. John has often been called Canada's Irish City. In the years between 1815, when vast industrial changes began to disrupt the old lifestyles in Europe, and Canadian Confederation in 1867, when immigration of that era passed its peak, more than 150,000 immigrants from Ireland flooded into St. John. Those who came in the earlier period were largely tradesmen, and many stayed in St. John, becoming the backbone of its builders. But when the Great Irish Potato Famine raged between 1845 to 1852, huge waves of famine refugees flooded these shores. It is estimated that between 1845 and 1847, some 30,000 arrived, more people than were living in the city at the time. In 1847, dubbed Black 47, one of the worst years of the famine, some 16,000 immigrants, most of them from Ireland, arrived at Partridge Island, the immigration and quarantine station at the mouth of St. John Harbour. By 1850, the Irish Catholic community constituted St. John's largest ethnic group. In the census of 1851, over half the heads of households in the city registered themselves as natives of Ireland. By 1871, 55% of St. John's residents were Irish natives or children of Irish-born mothers or fathers. There were violent confrontations between the Catholic and the Protestant Irish, especially in the 1840s. Canada's 2006 census found that amongst the St. John population's reported ethnic origins, 42.1% of the population described their background as Canadian, followed by English, Irish, Scottish, French, German, Dutch, North American Indian, Welsh, and many others. With regard to religion, 89.2% identify as Christian, 10.1% state no religious affiliation, and other religions including Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, and Hinduism together comprise less than 1%. While New Brunswick is a bilingual province, the Greater St. John area is overwhelmingly Anglophone. Of its 127,761 residents in 2011, only 5,520 were native French speakers, a much lower percentage than that for the province as a whole. Municipal government responsibility. St. John is governed by a body of elected officials, referred to as Common Council, whose responsibilities include setting the city operational budget, setting the city water utility budget, rates, enacting and amending bylaws, rezoning and land use permissions of properties in St. John, setting the capital budget for the city, act as the board of directors for the corporation, City of St. John, appoint persons to city staff and commissions, oversee the operation of city commissions and departments. Composition. The Common Council consists of the Mayor Mel Norton 2012 present, who runs at large, acts as chairman of the board, 2 at-large Common Councillors, 2 Common Councillors, from each of the city's 4 wards. 1 is elected by the council to serve as deputy mayor. Current council is Shelley Reinhardt, councillor at large, and deputy mayor Shirley McAllery. Councillor at large Ward 1 Bill Farron, Greg Norton, Ward 2 John Mackenzie, Susan Fullerton, Ward 3 Donna Reardon, Ward 4 Ray Strobridge, David Merritt. In the October 9, 2007 plebiscite, it was decided that as of the May 2008 quadrennial municipal elections, The city will be divided into 4 wards of approximately equal population, with 2 councillors to be elected by the voters in that ward, and 2 councillors to be elected at large.